Welcome to the Creative Brew, helping you keep your creative juices brewing. We're giving out chunks of insight, motivation, and practicality for your creative journey. We've got some great partners with the Creative Brew. First of all, Panels, Comics and Coffee Bar here in beautiful Oceanside, California, right off of Mission Avenue. They've got some of the hottest graphic novels and comics out right now. They also have a wide assortment of merchandise, toys, as well as back issue vintage comic books, and that I'm sure has some hidden gems in there. If you mention the Creative Brew, you'll get 10% off of your next purchase. You can also check them out on social media at Panels Coffee or go to panelscoffee.com. My next partner is Elevate Coffee Trading, and if you appreciate specialty coffee, enjoy outdoor adventure, and love helping elevate the lives of children around the world, then you're going to love Elevate Coffee Trading. Their mission is to extract hope through love, coffee, and adventures. There's free shipping in the United States, and every bag of coffee helps sponsor health and education for children in coffee-producing countries and in areas of need in the United States. You can use promo code ELEVATE21 on your next order, and you can follow their journey on social media at Elevate Coffee Trading, or you can visit online at elevatecoffeetrading.com, and let's start extracting hope together. Another partner of mine is AstroPad, and if you're a digital creator like me and you constantly use your iPad Pro, you can actually use AstroPad to change your graphics tablet into another professional graphics tablet, so you can use Photoshop, full versions of Adobe Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, all your favorite programs right on your iPad Pro or graphics tablet. This has been an awesome tool for me because I'm always having to do some fine-tuning, editing, repainting, recoloring on various design projects or working on logos. AstroPad is a huge asset for me. For teachers and students and educators, they actually have a great deal going on right now. This is an annual subscription, so it's a subscription app, but it's been a huge tool for me, and I don't know what I would do without AstroPad. So you can check them out at AstroPad app or go to astropad.com. And my last sponsor is the Cobopod. Cobopod is a boutique video and audio production studio based in Oceanside, California. And if you're a podcaster, vlogger, content creator, you should really come by and check out the venue for yourself. Anytime that I bring in a guest, they're amazed by the setup, amazed by the quality, the production value. Like I said, I think the Creative Brew just went up a notch. I actually went up incredible levels partnering up with the Cobopod and been able to create, 4K video. Everything looks great. Even the photographer that we have on staff, I use a lot of their photography for branded assets for the Creative Brew, as well as the audio for my podcast and my radio show. So if you want to feel like booking your session, and maybe you're thinking about starting a podcast, or maybe heck, you want to just sit in one day. I'm doing a podcast, or I'm doing a show. Hey, come by, check it out. See the venue, see the setup, check out everybody. It's a great vibe here. But let's book your session today at cobopod.org. And another sponsor is Baba Coffee, that is here in here in Carlsbad, California. Great vibes, good coffee. I love the setup over there. They actually offer wine, coffee, dessert, food. I love the avocado toast over there. Check it out. That's one that I would recommend. And right now, they're actually every Sunday. And it's actually going on right now. Is they have live music and food trucks, I believe. So they'll have a chef there as well as live music. So come by, go by Baba Coffee, and they're there for a few hours. So they usually have some different entertainment every Sunday. So go by there, check it out. So I wanted to give a special shout out to my new sponsor for the show, Baba Coffee. Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Brew, giving you insights on your creative journey. Today, we have Simon Drew. He is I would call him a creative savant. Just looking at his website, he does so many different things. He's a philosophical mentor, a poet, author, musician, and photographer. If you get a chance to check out any of his art, any of his photography, music online, it's awesome. And also too, he's got a book out called The Poet and the Sage, which I had the privilege of reading. I hadn't read the whole thing yet, but I've got the privilege of reading some of the poems, and it's awesome. There was one that really hit me with one of the poems, and we'll talk about that later. But
Sure.
really, just like I said, thank you for coming on to the show. And well, if you want to sort of share your story and a quick journey about you and where you're at now, and we'll get going with the show.
Sure. Yeah. Well, Quantel, thank you so much for having me here. This is a pleasure. And I guess you ask about the journey. Yeah, it's interesting. The past few interviews that I've done, we've kind of dived into the conversation, but I now remember that I love that question of like, what's the journey that you're on? Because I think that so much of what people find in the work that I do is the adventure, the journey. Because I've gone through many, many stages, I guess privately and also publicly, as a podcaster, as a musician, and as an artist, and now as a poet. And when you're somebody who is involved in so many different things at once, I find that it's helpful to try and understand what is the thing that is connecting all of these things together. And, ultimately, I think that what I've been trying to figure out with everything that I've been doing over the past, say, 5 to 10 years has been to explore what it would mean to live a truly good life. What and what that has led me to. I think that if you look at my poetry and if you look at my music, if you look at the podcast and the direction that it's gone, it all has to do with, I guess, coming into a deeper and deeper relationship with this strange, complex, weird reality that we all inhabit, and taking that with a certain degree of seriousness with which it deserves to be taken, and bringing people along on that adventure and saying, let's go find something. Seeing as we're all here and seeing as we're all alive, supposedly, let's see if we can become more alive and experience more and see more. And that's kind of the adventure that I'm going on.
That's awesome. So with the walled garden, so I see, I was looking through, and I see you're doing so many different things. You know, yeah, I see you're a philosophical mentor. Can you sort of clarify what that actually is, and how does that pertain? I mean, I didn't know who you actually work with or who your
Mm,
ideal, clients would be with something like that.
sure. Yeah. I guess philosophical mentor, it comes down to the process that I use to engage with my clients, students, mentees. And really, I am trained in the Stoic school of philosophy. So for those who don't know, who are listening to this, I mean, the Stoic school of philosophy is an ancient school from the Hellenistic period back in Greece and Rome. And so people that they might know are people like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca the Younger, Epictetus. These were some of the most well-known philosophers of the Stoic school. And so since 2017, I've been exploring that philosophy on my podcast, which used to be called The Practical Stoic, but has now flourished into The Walled Garden. And so, as I said, this philosophical mentoring comes down to the way that I approach my clients. And it's not like you might get in certain life coaching experiences. I don't tell my clients what they should be doing in order to, I guess, move to a deeper experience with reality and a better experience of living well. What I try to do is engage my clients in a philosophical dialogue, particularly with the framework of the kind of virtue ethics that we see in these Hellenistic philosophies. And so, we have discussions about just general practical things that they're dealing with in their life, but from the philosophical perspective, getting people to just open up their minds, their, their hearts, their eyes, their ears, and to engage in a deeply meaningful discussion about what it would mean for them to live a deeply flourishing existence, you might say.
Yeah.
And so the great thing about that is that a lot of my clients already come to me kind of knowing who I am, kind of already trusting me as a person because they've listened to the podcast. And it's funny, they've already built a relationship with me before they even do the initial consultation. And so they already feel comfortable sharing with me. But I always tell my clients that after each conversation, you should walk away feeling as though you have just had a deeply meaningful conversation that went below the surface with a close friend of yours who truly cares to tell you the truth and to have a truthful, honest conversation about what it would mean to live a life of true meaning. So that's kind of the experience I try to have with my clients, and it hasn't steered me wrong yet. And I have just a beautiful relationship with incredible people all around the world who are interested in having that kind of dialogue, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. But why do you think that is? I mean, I know I'm a huge fan of Stoicism. I love a lot of the philosophical teachings from that, and it's just little things that I try to incorporate in my own personal life. Why do you feel like? I mean, and it seems like you've got a lot of people that they're wanting to connect to something deeper. Do you feel? I mean, even with the way society is, and just just the pace of technology in society, do you feel people feel like they're being lost, and maybe they're trying to reconnect to something, maybe to something that's a little bit deeper than what we see as society?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly stand by the idea that we are going through a meaning crisis where people are kind of flocking away, or at least they have been in the past few years from the traditional religions of our society. And I kind of see it as, it seems to me like there is a deep cynicism taking over the general morale of our culture. I would certainly go as far as to say that perhaps one of the core philosophies of our day is cynicism. People are really losing faith, and that's something that I really took away from one of my mentors and somebody who I'm working with in the World Garden, Kai Whiting. He and myself and Sharon LaBelle, who's also there, we are really working to bring people into a certain level of faith in existence. It's easy to look around and to get very cynical, to just to and of course, because life is difficult, and we currently live in an age, as you point out, where technological advancements are just, they're so quick, and there's so much of it, and our landscape that we live in is just changing at every single moment, and it's hard for us to keep up with that. I think that what we're doing is, whether it is in the personal mentoring that I do or within the Walled Garden, we're trying to, as I say, bring people into a deeper relationship. Meaning making is how Sharon puts it, or we would all agree that we're trying to bring people into a deeper relationship with the divine. And what that means, we are all figuring out together, where we're going on that adventure together.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So with the walled garden, how did that even come about? I mean, I know you were saying that it started out as the Practical Stoic podcast, and then sort of transformed into the walled garden. I didn't know, as far as with that, is that a sort of a almost like a creative think tank, philosophical group? I mean, I didn't know if anybody can join, or if that's something that's as far as like, how do you become a member of that? I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
I was intrigued by that.
Yeah, well, I think this is good feedback. And what I will say is that the Walled Garden it's a project that we're all figuring out together as we go, and so since the start of, the Walled Garden, we brought our members who had already joined into the conversation of what's the adventure that we're all going on here. And certainly we have our core foundation for the Walled Garden. Firstly, everybody who is involved in terms of Sharon LaBelle, Kai Whiting, and myself, we, as the core contributors and the leaders of this company, or community is a better way to put it, we all come from the Stoic background. We all share those Stoic principles among us. So we have the values there of the way that we approach our exploration of philosophy and theology and life. But nonetheless, it's a community where we're trying to aid human flourishing on multiple levels. So we do our meetup groups where we discuss philosophy. We bring interesting guests into the meetups. I just came off a great meetup where we had a whole bunch of people there sitting down with Chris Fisher, who is one of the leaders of the kind of traditional Stoicism movement. And so we were discussing, the really traditional view of Stoicism and how we can experience that on a deeper level. A great way to bring community together from people all around the world who have extremely diverse backgrounds but share the core values. And then we're doing the one-on-one coaching there, so we're really focusing on the individual, and we really stand by our method of philosophical mentoring. And we're also exploring other ways to expand this community, and to expand our reach into the outer world, by even working with, say, companies, and helping them to structure their company in a way that really aids the flourishing of their employees, which ultimately leads, to a better company. So we are intentionally unaware of the final destination, if there is one, of what the walled garden is, but we're very explorative with this, and we want to continue to shift it until, we feel as though we've arrived at some sort of point,
That's great. That's that you really bring up a great point, especially with corporations and other organizations that trying to incorporate more Stoic qualities within that culture, and building the employees and the management, and creating leaders within that organization. I see a lot of businesses and corporations. I see it all the time, where, presidents and CEOs are getting fired and people are getting laid off. And I think there's just a lot of people they're trying to find an answer somewhere. They're trying to figure out, where to go. And I think over the past couple of years, it's definitely made people sort of think about, who they are, what really matters. And I think really just trying to find a deeper meaning in their life than just, working a, 9-to-5 job, what else could I do as a human being, that's going to give some kind of value, first of all, to myself, but it's going to give some kind of value to society. I think personally for me, I think those are things that I think about, is trying to figure out, just the things that I'm trying to build and create, how could I create something that's going to affect the hearts and minds of society, or even the planet. And I really feel like people like you and others are doing what they can to help, I think, to help evolve humanity and go to that next, I really think, next stage of just creative consciousness, and trying to figure out, really trying to figure out what the best, what the best route is, what that journey is. Like, I really feel like, I don't think anyone's gonna really knows where we're going, but I think just making that effort to, take that step forward and go that path, I think that's always critical.
And perhaps we don't know where we're going, but we can all certainly aim at perhaps participating in a more meaningful way with the adventure of where it is that we're going. It's life is so much more fun that way when you decide to take it with a grave seriousness. Like, this is a very intense and serious enterprise that we're all involved in here as the human race, we're in it. And the thing is, nature kills us 100% of the time. And so, seeing as we are here, seeing as we are alive, why don't we go on a grand adventure and see what we could become, who we could become, what we could achieve. And when I mention achieve, it's like, that's one of the powerful things about taking a philosophical and specifically a Stoic approach to things is when we say, what do you want to achieve? You know, well, do you want to achieve the goods of the world, say money, fame, success in those sorts of areas? Well, the Stoics would suggest that the deepest experience that you can have with life is when what you want to achieve is to move towards virtue and wisdom and an inner enlightenment, what they call eudaimonia, the flourishing, the inner flourishing. And so, part of what we're doing over at the World Garden is we're saying, we want to achieve that, we want to achieve that internal flourishing. And we want to take other people on that adventure as well. That's our goal. And other people can have their goals. That's fine. We're living in the world where this is the path that we're walking. Yeah.
Wow. So what as far as maybe personally for you, when did you make that shift? I mean, I didn't know if you've always been sort of interested in Stoicism or, or maybe did you get to a certain point in your life to where, something happened and you felt yourself being open to entering that realm. I didn't know what that point was for you in your own journey.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if there's a single point that you could give where it's like, this is when, but there's a pretty big moment that I'll talk about, All right. That quote, the fool who persists in his folly will obtain wisdom, something like that. I feel like much of my story, if you look back and you just follow what I've been doing, I think it's the story of a fool who is trying to persist in his folly in many ways. But there was a big moment on my 20th birthday, and I was studying music. And I was down at university. My friend said to me, hey, come on over to the city hall. There's this guy, Eric Thomas. You ever heard of Eric Thomas?
Yeah.
Yeah. The hip hop preacher, man.
Yeah, I listen to him all the time.
He's great, And I was kind of like, yeah, okay, yeah, motivation guy. All right, okay, I'll go over there. At that time in my life, I had only ever really read maybe one or two books all the way through. This was 20 years old, and I was just an absolute fool when it came to. And now I was successful as a student, and I was very successful as a human being. People tended to be around me, but nonetheless, as a philosophical seeker, there was nothing there. And so I went over to this thing, and there were three words that Eric said that stuck with me forever, and completely changed the way that I see the world. He said, information changes situations. And when I heard that, after leaving that theater and all of the energy and the motivation and everything, in the year after that, I read about 80 books, and I just decided, I'm going to go out there. And now I started with the personal development stuff, that's just where I went. But, as Jim Rohn says, motivation only goes so far, because if you motivate a fool, then you've just got a motivated fool, and that's not a lot of good, so but then eventually I found my way to Stoicism through Tim Ferriss's recommendation of Letters from a Stoic by Seneca the Younger. And that's when I started to realize that a lot of these ideas that are kind of surface level in the personal development, new agey world, they have deep roots that go back to the ancient ideas that are so much richer and so much more. You can tell when you read these ancient writings, the spirit that they inhabit when they're writing those pieces of philosophy is just, that they're having an experience of personal enlightenment or personal eudaimonia, So I think that was a huge moment for me, that Eric Thomas speech, just information changes situations. I just realized I'm such a noob when it comes to books and all this. And I just started seeking information, and that just led me on a wild path. And here we are.
Yeah. That always happens. You get into that one little I would say, crux point, and you start getting awareness of a certain ideal or certain books, and then you find yourself like, on that seeking path where you find one book and then find another one, then you find another one, and then you've read, like I said, you read like 80 books. I mean, that's just information that's being absorbed into your
Yeah.
own personal being. Like I said, I found myself doing that personally, getting to that point to where I, was just reading, and not to say I couldn't remember like every page, but there was always certain concepts within each of those books that, that I try to incorporate in my own personal life. But I definitely need to get back, because I've always loved. I mean, I'll see little quotes and stuff all the time on social media from Seneca and Marcus Aurelius, and I was like, wow, I was like, man, that makes sense, and so I definitely need to go back and read some of those writings, because it's sort of amazing. I've always been a big fan of certain times like that, like even when you had those philosophical schools, and you had maybe that group of artists, creatives, philosophers, all in the same era, and they were all sort of throwing ideals at each other, and I think it's one of those. I think that's really missing now. You see it somewhat in various, and I know the walled garden is trying to do that. It's definitely striving to do that, but yeah, back then you had those little enclaves of all these philosophical masters that was just throwing ideals out to each other, and just made the whole group grow. And those are,
Yeah.
like I said, obviously writings that last until this day. I mean, that's something I've always loved. I mean, I've always loved. Huge fan of Da Vinci, Michelangelo, and all those people that were around that same time, and everybody knew each other, and everybody had those ideals and those concepts, and sort of mishmashing and throwing ideals against each other. I think those things are sort of missing now. It's always, and I never, even with them, I mean, it never really was. I wouldn't think it was competition, maybe a healthy competition, but it's just one of those, when you get around that group, or you get around those people that you can share ideals with, and there's no animosity. Like, everybody wants to grow, and everybody's trying to find their own meaning and purpose. I think that's everybody when everybody grows. So
Well, it's interesting you talk about sharing around these ideals, and I guess aiming higher, and there has been a shift, and it seems like that shift is something to do with, well, so much of the narrative of, I guess, popular culture today is like, what can I get? Like we're so obsessed with consumption, and I'm not cynical about our modern kind of capitalistic societies. I think that there's a lot of good that has come from us freeing up markets and letting everybody try to expand their capabilities, and even if it is in the pursuit of material goods. But nonetheless, there's a massive difference between living your life out of kind of what can I get mindset, as opposed to like who can I become. And I think that so much of the ancient way of thinking was around that question of who can I become. That's why the Stoics, one of the interesting things about the Stoic philosophy is death to them was like the final test. It's like, can you die an honorable death? Not kicking and screaming, like trying to cling on to life in some sort of kind of grasping way, but like, can you show that by the end of your life, you have become such a fortified character as an individual, so at peace with reality, so at peace within yourself and within the cosmos, that you can die an honorable death. I mean, Seneca, he gives this really extreme example where he says there's this Spartan soldier who was captured as a slave. And the very first time that he was asked to do a slave's task, which was to take the bedpan or something like that, he screamed out in his native tongue, "I will not be a slave," and he ran against the wall and he cracked his head open, right? And he died. And to Seneca, that was the ultimate picture of how close each human being is to true freedom, because freedom to the Stoics was never compromise on your moral values, never compromise on the true values and principles that are guiding you in your life. Never let somebody be your master. You know, like, you need to have that internal solitude, and you need to decide. And to Seneca, that was, man, that guy was free right until the last moment, you know. And that's a part of becoming something, you know, becoming a person who is so fortified in your values that you are willing to, you know, live it out right to the very end. And so, of course, I understand that is such an extreme example, right?
Yeah,
So
no.
I really hope people don't take that too, you know, but it gives you an image of the way that they were thinking back then, right? You know, it's just a completely different way of seeing the world.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, that's yeah, that I think that those values, those moral values, man, you definitely don't see that anymore. That's something where, you know, when you draw the line and like, okay, this is how I want to live the rest of my life, despite whatever, you know, things happen to me. I am, you know, this is who I am. That's, man, that's a hard line.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people are willing to live like that. But
And it's
definitely,
up for question, you know, like whether or not that Spartan was, you know, that was the best option for him to do. You know, that's open for discussion, right? But nonetheless, the point is, you know, they viewed the world as a place to become something honorable and virtuous and wise, and those were the ultimate values. I mean, when was the last time you saw, you know, like a public figure or a politician speaking about how we need more wisdom? It's like, you know, back then wisdom was, that's the number one thing, you know, like the best thing that you could attain.
yeah,
When was the last time you heard anybody say the word wisdom or virtue, let alone, you know?
yeah,
It's just not a part of our common popular way of seeing the world. And I think it you think about what Carl Jung said. You know, he talked about how our technological advancements are getting so quick and so insanely large that if we can't match that technological advancement with moral wisdom, we're going to end up just self-destructing. You know, we're all just going to end up blowing ourselves up, which, I mean, like, hey, the possibility is there in the next 100 years.
yeah.
We are moving so quickly, but has our moral wisdom caught up with our technological advancement? I don't know. I mean, we haven't killed each other yet fully, you know. So yeah, but you have to think, you know, who is seeking wisdom? Because if you've got that philosophical mindset, I mean, philosophy is by definition the love of wisdom. So, you know, it's the highest good, you know, for a philosopher. So, you know, it's just something to consider. Do we hear enough of it these days?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, speaking of books, and you got the Poet and the Sage, and I got to read a few excerpts from it. What compelled you to write this book?
Yeah, that's probably the right question. What the hell compelled me to write a book of poetry and prose? You know, dealing with deep kind of metaphysical, theological, and philosophical concepts.
Yeah.
You know, because I always thought that I was going to write a book about, you know, Stoicism, or like a 10-step guide to Stoicism, something like that. But when I started writing The Poet and the Sage, that's just not what came out. And I never considered myself a poet before I wrote this. Though it completely changed my relationship with my father when I wrote this book, because, well, let me back up a second. In Stoicism, there is this principle that the thing that we are aiming at as Stoics is we're aiming at virtue and at having wisdom, right? But that should lead us to, as they say, living in agreement with nature. And one of the things that means, or, you know, it's almost the whole picture, is each of us has a unique human nature. You enjoy things that I don't enjoy. I enjoy things that you don't enjoy. We're both aiming at different things, but we're still human. We just have different individual natures. And so when you are living in agreement with your personal nature, to the Stoics, you are by definition at the same time also living in agreement with the nature of the whole cosmos, because you're a tiny little part of that. And so when I was writing The Poet and the Sage, I thought perhaps the best thing that I could aim at is to write something that's truly coming from my nature. And what that meant was that when poetry started coming out when I was writing, I mean, I went with it and I said, okay, well, clearly the part of me that I don't quite understand that is moving me wants to write poetry. I'm going to let this happen. I'll tell you the first thing that happened with that book is I actually wrote down kind of this strange waking dream. And it was a dream that was kind of like very archetypal, you know, deep symbolism and imagery. And I didn't fully understand it. I still don't fully understand it, which might be confusing to people who are thinking, well, you've just released the book and you don't understand it. It's fine. We'll get there. But I took this waking dream, what I'd written, to my good friend Sharon LaBelle, because she was the only person who I thought would probably have some insight into it. And she just said, keep on writing, you know, you have to pursue this. She just read it and she thought, whoa, what is this? But keep on going, you know. And so I did. And what ended up happening was I wrote this book that I stood back and I thought, wow, I have no idea what this is, where it came from, what it all means. But there is definitely a series of deep, you know, symbolic, metaphysical, philosophical, and theological concepts in there that I'm wrestling with, that if people read it through kind of on the surface level, they'll get a book that, well, many people have said to me so far that it's very akin to, say, The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, right? Or even like The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Oh man, I'm going to get his name wrong, but
my favorite book.
It's that style, you know. But if you go deeper with it, it's the kind of book that you could read, you know, 10 times and you still won't necessarily find the bottom of the ideas that are in there. And I know that because I wrote it, and even after 15 edits of the book, when I was going through, I was still finding new things that I hadn't noticed, new patterns that I hadn't noticed. So I think that just came from me allowing the artistic process to happen, the poetic process to happen, which is one of not moving, but of being moved, you know, allowing the process to happen through you. And so this is just the beginning. There's more books to come, you know, once we get to a certain level of sales that satisfies my publisher. And it's all a part of this deeper adventure that I'm going on, exploring the fundamentals of living a deeply meaningful life.
That's great. That's great. So the book, where is it available at right now?
Yeah, so that it's at the moment where we're kind of just getting it on Amazon in a few weeks, I believe. I'm working on the audiobook, but for now, people can get it. If they go to thewalledgarden.com, they can buy it from the store on that website. Or if they actually join up and become a patron of the Walled Garden, even if it's $3 a month, you can actually read the online version there as well. So
that's great. That's awesome. So right now, I mean, what things are inspiring you right now? What things are, you know, pulling at the heartstrings of Simon Drew?
Yeah. Well, one of the unintended consequences of writing The Poet and the Sage was I felt a deep kind of call to go and study a Master of Divinity. So I'm currently doing that. So, you know, I'm looking forward to learning these ancient biblical languages and, you know, learning more about the tradition of our culture, really, and seeing what I find there. So that's always fun. I think the thing that's really inspiring me at the moment is just stepping back and noticing the kinds of people who are coming into my life and who are excited to work with me, which I have no idea how it happened, but it's like, you know, if you had have asked me, you know, 5 years ago, you know, where do you think you're going to be in 5 years? I wouldn't have said, well, I'm going to have two of the best mentors I could have ever picked, you know, to go along with me on this adventure in the Walled Garden. Sharon LaBelle she is by far, I would say, the wisest person I've ever met in my life, and she said yes to go on this adventure with me, and I'm honored. And so that energizes me every day. And then Kai Whiting is, he is such a skilled academic and thinker and philosopher, and somebody who I've come to develop a really beautiful friendship with. And I adore Kai. And, so having him there as well. And both of them, I trust that they're both on this adventure of truly aiming at wisdom, virtue, and an experience of the divine. That inspires me every single day, because I just can't believe that I get to work with these amazing people. So, yeah.
That's awesome. That's great. So right now, I mean, creative tips, and this is something that I ask all of my guests on the show. What is a creative tip or tips that you can provide with our audience?
Let's see. One thing that I always say is make sure that the room where you create in is as beautiful as you can make it, and just I'll give you an example. On my desk here, it's silly, but it's like I found this little antique kind of like little vase thing, right?
Yeah.
And then I just found little dry flowers around the place, and I kind of put them in, and that's something that, yeah, it's silly, but it's another little element of creative beauty that I get to look at when I'm in the creative process. But if I really think about it, another thing that I would want to mention as a creative tip, for a long period of my life, I considered myself as a jazz trumpeter and a jazz singer. And that's because I studied jazz at university. And so I put those walls around my creativity. That's what I do. It wasn't until I decided to say, hang on, no, I'm not necessarily just a jazz trumpeter and singer. I'm also, I also do a podcast, and that's creative. And I do this, and that's creative. I do that. Or I'm interested in this. I'm interested in that. I started to break down those barriers and say, no, okay, let's categorize myself as a creative individual, and let's see where that takes me.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until I started doing that I picked up the piano, again, when I hadn't really been focusing on it at all. And that ended up creating an album on piano, and then now learning didgeridoo, and then writing poetry. And, I discovered so much more in the kind of the well of creativity within me when I decided to drop those labels that were kind of holding me in a certain box. Creativity by definition goes outside of the boxes, and you need, as a creative person, to have some sort of structure, because otherwise you'll go insane. But you also need to recognize that your job is to teach people how to see and experience something different, and you need to do that as well if you're going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, drop those labels and try and explore your own creative pursuits, even if it means going somewhere that you haven't gone before.
Yeah, those are great tips. I think that's, you always get those, those people that feel like, hey, you're a, even with you're supposed to be a jazz musician, and that's all you're supposed to be in this one little box. And I think even now, I mean, I can tell even from all the things that you're doing right now. I mean, you're starting to destroy all the little stories or limitations that that people say what you're supposed to be doing, or maybe how to do something. I think I find that refreshing, because a lot of people, even with me, I'm by trade, I'm a graphic designer, but with all the things that I'm doing now, I feel like I'm way more than that, and I'm still trying to express more and more of who I am, and connecting with people like you, to gain a deeper insight, as far as who I am as a person, and how creatively authentic I can be as a human being on this planet. So going into I was going to backtrack. It was something I thought about. You were I see you're doing all these things, and I think a lot of people. I've always sort of wondered, even with a lot of the guests that I bring on, is like what is your? I know you had, like you just mentioned, you have to have a routine to sort of keep yourself sort of structured. But what is your routine through the day? I mean, I see you putting out all this amazing things. You're with the walled garden. Um, like, what is your daily routine?
Yeah, well, okay. As Jim Rohn says, and it's one of my favorite quotes. He says, "Listen to what I say, but don't watch too close." Right? Man, I struggle with the routine. Hey, and I'm only just now. See, for the past 2 years, I'd say, because I was doing like three things at once, three major projects, I could get away with not having that routine to my life. Now that I'm launching a book, trying to do a YouTube channel and, the Walled Garden, the podcast, more collaborations. There's so much happening, and I'm moving to America soon. And, it's like all of these things colliding. Now I'm starting to realize, okay, if I want to do all this, and Master of Divinity, I have to have more structure, because it's just not good. It's not good for the soul. So, I think that my method so far has been pretty chaotic, and it's been good because it's gotten me to, this point where I am, where I've got all of these opportunities that are now in my lap. Now, what I'm starting to do is, to clean up certain aspects and catch up with everything that I've already done, so that, all of them are aiming in that same direction together, and I can sort of outsource certain things that I'm not necessarily good at. I don't know if that necessarily answers your question, other than to say that I'm terrible with routine. It has gotten me to where I am now, but I recognize that there's a certain routine that I need to have moving forward that is going to get me through this next 3 or 4 year period of accelerating everything that I want to do at once.
That's great answer. I mean, it's one of those where people, I tend, personally for me, I tend to be a little, I guess you would call it, chaotic, and to where I can have a messy table, but I know where everything is at.
I like that term, though, chaotic.
So I find myself, I used to bash myself a lot. I'm like, I'm not, organized, but the things that I've been able to create and the opportunities, what hadn't been because I went the straight and narrow, was because I just spread myself out, and how far could I extend out and express more of who I am, and touch people's lives, and create more things, and like I said, planting those seeds, and those things tend to pop up. Now I do, like what you said, I do find myself, now I have to, I'm actually working on a graphic novel right now, but there's just a lot of things that I have to make sure that I keep everything going that same direction, and sort of streamlining some things, just trying to be a little bit more efficient. But but that's not going to stop me trying to touch however many people's lives that I can, just through my art, or through my design work, or anything else. So that was a great answer.
Well, tell me what you think of this, because I mean, okay, so we probably share many of the same qualities in terms of the way that I like that chaotic, because it makes perfect sense to me. But it seems like what's necessary for the artist, and just for people in general, is that there has to be an immovable part of you, and that seems to be values, principles. What do you stand for? That's the immovable. Movable when you feel as though one of them is out of alignment with better wisdom, but nonetheless, that's the thing. That's the rock that you stand upon. That's your firm foundation amid the chaos. But one of the great things about the Stoic philosophy is their insistence that there is only this point right now, here, this, and that insistence comes right back down to the decision-making process, because the Stoics, even though they did look ahead to the future in order to anticipate potential devastation, they call it negative visualization. It's like, imagine everything that could happen that would throw your life into chaos.
Mhm.
And now imagine that it definitely will happen, so that you'll be prepared if it does happen, right?
Yeah.
But nonetheless, their decision-making progress was always, right now, based on the circumstances, based on the situation around me in this moment, what's the most appropriate decision? And that kind of moral framework is extremely flexible. They would go as far as to say, well, hey, cannibalism is neither good nor bad, right? It's an indifferent, right? Because there may be a point where you need to be a cannibal because that's the most appropriate thing to do in that situation. They would give a crazy example, that may never happen to anybody, but by definition, it could happen. And so, to the Stoics, it was extremely simple, but also, just powerful. Like, in this moment, what is the most appropriate choice to make based on what you see around you? And I think that that's helpful for artists, because it means that you can be thrown into a little bit of chaos, but at the same time be grounded in a very a very solid way of making decisions amid that chaos.
Mhm.
So I don't know, it seems to be helpful for me and many others, so it might be something that artists out there would consider.
Oh yeah, I'm sure on that. Yeah, that's I think a lot of people, especially a lot of artists and a lot of people that sort of that's connected to the podcast, through the show. I think the biggest thing with a lot of artists, and especially aspiring and younger artists, especially in this generation, is just trying to figure out what is it they stand for. I know a lot of them have different backgrounds, different stories, and trying to figure out what that anchor is, and that doesn't move for anything, and allowing life and other things to sort of circulate around that, and be as flexible as possible. But there's certain things that will never move, and being anchored in that. I think a lot of younger artists, actually a lot of even older artists, I think they're trying to sort of navigate that and figure out what that what that anchor is, and then allowing their artwork and life and everything else to circulate around that. It's very definitely an aspiring goal, because we're always thinking about what do we got to do tomorrow? What do we have to do a couple of months from now? We scheduled something, now I'm looking forward to 5 months down the road, instead of like right now. How do we need to show up? Who are we right now? And that can be a very scary thing and powerful thing at the same time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you're exactly right, and I think Seneca has the most compelling argument for me on this point, because he just points out, like, when was the last time you were right about any prediction of your future? Like, we are so because what we do, it's crazy, but we do it all the time, is we look into the future and we say, oh gosh, that horrible thing is coming. And then we experience the pain of that horrible thing that might never happen in this moment. So we're basically pulling all of the pain and the suffering of the future and experiencing it right now. And, if you're not careful, that can be your entire life experience, constantly being, fearful or in pain of future events. But Seneca just points out, we're almost never right in our predictions of what will happen. Either it will be much worse than what you imagine, or it won't even happen, but ultimately, and this is something that's in the Sermon on the Mount in the Bible as well. It's this idea of, what is it? Tend to the evils of today. So I know I'm not getting the quote right. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof, right? Take care of this day, this moment, right? And if you're doing that, then at the same time as you're doing that, you're also simultaneously taking care of the rest of the moments in your life, in your future. Because what could be better than paying attention to this moment and what's in front of you right now? There's nothing better or more grounding than that. So yeah, it's not a good habit to get into, but for some reason or another, that's how we go as human
Yeah.
beings.
Yeah, so that's the truth.
Yeah.
So right now, before we sign off, what are some words of wisdom that you can provide to our audience? Something that may resonate with them, in a few weeks when this episode releases, or maybe a year from now, and they search around and they happen to find this episode with Simon Drew. What is something you can tell our audience?
Oh gosh, words of wisdom. The life that you're living is, as I said earlier, like nature kills us 100% of the time. What we're involved in here, it is important, and not, and more than that, it certainly is the case that in the past there have been people who have made claims to enlightenment, personal enlightenment, truest extent in their internal world. And I would just encourage people to take that claim really seriously, because it's not clear to me that we in our modern age know how to take those claims seriously. Because one of the turning points for me was hearing Jordan Peterson say, you should conceptualize the highest possible good for your life, and you should aim at that highest possible good. And then he said, because what else have you got to do that's better than that? And that hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, whoa, okay, he's backed you into a logical corner. And I would say the same thing to people. Have you got anything better to do than to truly seek a life of deep, deep meaning by aiming as high as you possibly could and setting aim, to achieve that, and perhaps we don't get there, but man, like, just listen to, the way that we talk to each other. It's like, shoot for the stars, and, we all know intuitively that we have the potential to experience deep meaning in our lives and to do better and to experience more and to be more. And it's not easy, but nothing worthwhile is easy. So I just encourage people not to take those claims of enlightenment with too much cynicism or skepticism, but to inspect them, and to see where it takes you.
Yeah, those are some awesome words of wisdom. That's great. Love Jordan Peterson. Love him.
Yeah, what a champion.
Yeah. So right now, what is the best way to get in contact with you, to check out everything that you're doing right now, to check out the Walled Garden, check out your book? What is the best way to get in touch with you?
Sure. Well, look, if people want to find me personally, they can go to simonjedrew.com. There's a whole bunch of poetry on there. If they want to book in a free consultation with me with the philosophical mentoring, I'd love to meet them. They can do that via that website. They can also go to thewalledgarden.com as well. And we'd love to see you at any of our meetups that we're doing with interesting speakers and on topics that we believe are incredibly important. Go over there, read the poetry, whatever you want to do, have a look around. And if they want to get the poet and the sage, they can go to thewalledgarden.com and just go to the store link in the menu and it'll be over there. So that's great. So, hey, once again, thank you, Simon, for coming onto the show. Very appreciative. For my audience, if you get a chance to check this out, this has been a great episode. A mix of ancient wisdom, creativity, insight. I think this is, like I said, this is the perfect mix for what the show is, what the Creative Brew is. Always looking to bring insights and practicality and a mix of other little concepts and brew it up. And this is what the creative journey is. This is what the Creative Brew is about. So, Simon, thank you for coming onto the show. Very, very grateful. This has been another great episode of the Creative Brew. Be creative, stay inspired.